It was as a result of the outpouring of the volunteer spirit in the United States that this program actually came into being. After the September 11, 2001 attacks in the United States, what we saw from our civilian population was a huge outpouring of individuals who wanted to do something to help. As a result of that, President George W. Bush implemented the Citizen Corps program, of which CERT is a component. This gave the citizens a vehicle with which to become trained and to be able to help more effectively if and when that occurs again in the United States. We've got these people trained to do a job and to more effectively integrate into the first responder system.
CERT's Community Emergency Response Teams. We encourage local citizens to participate in the CERT program because they have an ownership in their community.
In the event of a disaster, first responders may be overwhelmed. They may not be able to respond in a timely manner that we're used to. Roads may be closed, people may have trouble trying to get to you. That's where CERT comes in. We try to get you some information on how you can better prepare yourselves and your families, take care of yourself and your families in times of need. You'll be taught basic emergency preparedness, fire safety and suppression, emergency medical operations, light search and rescue, CERT organization, disaster psychology, terrorism, and finally, a full-scale exercise.
When they train in the CERT program, it teaches them how to take care of small fires. We're not training them to be firefighters. We're not training them to be paramedics. But if they have a small fire, they can put that fire out. They have the confidence that they can put that fire out safely. They know which fire extinguishers to use, which ones not to use, more importantly. In times of disaster, the CERT teams can bring an organization to the disaster. When we have a disaster, it's chaos. A definition of disaster is chaos. The very best we can hope for is organized chaos. And so the CERT team, that's one of the things that they can bring to their community is organization to that disaster. Secondly, the CERT teams can bring a force for the first responders. When the first responders arrive on scene, they can already have victims triaged. They can already have extinguished small fires so that they don't get out of hand and become large fires. They can do crowd control. They can be a force multiplier for our first responders. And thirdly, they can be hope. CERT teams can be hope for the victims.
The section in CERT is disaster psychology, and it's a really great section. It teaches the responders what their capabilities are, how to use empathy and compassion toward those citizens that may have lost their home, may have lost a loved one, the right thing to say, the wrong thing to say.
When someone's house is affected in a disaster, it may not be a national disaster, but it's a disaster nonetheless to that victim. And that victim needs someone there that can bring hope to that situation. And CERT members are trained through disaster psychology how to bring hope to a situation like that.
A very important aspect of disaster psychology is the active listening that we do when we're on a scene or listening to a citizen and really letting them know that we're plugged in and engaged with them and hearing what they're saying. And sometimes that's all it takes is a good, strong ear to listen to them and be empathetic to their needs. They wear the vests that are reflective. They have a hard helmet. Those are for their safety as well. But it also, when you see those CERT members coming, or you see people, you know you can go to them and say, hey, what do I do to do this? Where do I get directions? Who can help me with my pet? Who can help me with my loved one that needs medications? Whatever those needs are, and try to have those CERT members direct them in the right way. Sometimes they're doing rubble and search and rescue, and sometimes they're doing compassion and just talking or listening, especially when there's emotional issues, trauma going on with victims, and it may just have been they've lost their loved one, or it may be their pet is their loved one that they've lost. All those things play into the part of how they react psychologically when there is a disaster. So the section on disaster psychology is very, very important for the CERT team members to learn what to look for, learn how they may or may not be feeling, and how to respond to those particular things.
The terrorism portion of the CERT training involves educating the citizens on what they need to do to prepare their own homes for a terrorism event in the United States, and it also teaches them how they can probably assist our first responders.
Soft targets are easily accessible and they're predictable. Predictable meaning you kind of know how many people are in church on Sunday morning.
Our citizens, if they are properly trained, can assist those first responders and do jobs that will free up individuals to respond to that scene.
Well, the original CERT program came down. There was not a communications module in it, and we felt like there were communications alternatives that people would benefit by discussing and learning. During the CERT course, we of course cover the conventional means of communications people use every day, their telephones and their cell phones and fax machines. Then we go through the vulnerabilities to those communications, whether the emergency or incident be man-made or natural. Those lines of communications often fail. And during the class, we discuss alternative means of communication, whether it's with family radio service, children's walkie-talkies, ham radio operators, and citizen band radio. So we try to give them ideas and have them thinking along the lines of communications during an emergency so that they can be prepared for communications emergencies.
In the disaster medical operations portion of the class, we cover many things, including how to triage or to sort your victims.
All right, now that we've gone ahead and triaged our victims, we need to figure out what's actually wrong with them.
We go over the 3 killers: bleeding, airway, and shock. We also go over head-to-toe assessments, which helps us to identify what is causing those main issues with the 3 killers. The information provided in disaster medical operations may mean the difference between life or death before emergency services personnel can arrive on scene. At the conclusion of the course, we put our students through a full-scale exercise which puts them through the stress, exposes them to stress and chaos that they may see during a real emergency.
Be advised, there's a tornado that went through. Resources are limited. You do not have any ambulances that are free at this time. You're on your own right now.
We want to expose them to that kind of stress beforehand so that when the real event happens, they're ready for it.
In any disaster or emergency, the first responders are those who are impacted by the event. They're not immediately first responders on the scene, official first responders. However, the individuals that have been affected by this emergency or disaster are. If we can train those people to be able to support themselves and reach out and support their community, their neighborhood, their neighbors, and gather information to give to the first responders when they arrive on the scene, that is one of the major goals of the Citizen Corps CERT program, is to do that. If all we achieve is creating a prepared citizenry, then we have made a major milestone in the United States. All disasters happen locally. They start locally. It takes a while for resources to start pouring into the community. So we need to train them to be able to take care of themselves.
There is no cost to attend the CERT training. If you would like more information, please call 334-749-8161.